The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium. Okay, we are back to talk with Janet Phelan. Now, you know, she does reports on our show weekly, or at least when we have a show when she's available down in Mexico. And they've been on some very interesting topics, probably centering more on the guardianship / conservatorship / corrupt judiciary. Has been a lot of the writing on it, which incidentally is the theme, I guess, through her book. We'll be talking about Exile, by Janet Phelan. Exile, and in this case, literally being in Mexico, driven out by her experiences in these United States, or I shouldn't say United States, these states. And we talked about the book earlier, but I have not read it. Well, I did. I got the ability to read a PDF audio-wise, and I listened as I drove, and was very, what would be the word? Just drawn into the book and listening. I wanted to hear what the next part was. It was very riveting, and it was. I really did a lot of thinking about this book because in the book you follow her life basically from when her mother was put under a guardianship. It was all through shady circumstances, which later became obvious when money was missing, and ultimately she died because of the handling of her. Janet, along the way, struggling against the system to try and undo this, unsuccessfully, ultimately, for her mother's life, and it continues on past that. That's the story. That's basically the storyline through there, the thread. But along the way, she recounts, and this is a true story, by the way. She asserts this is a true story. She names names. And she actually provides documents in the back of the book. You can see actual documents with names and stamps and whatnot. But this is a true story. So when you read the book, some of the things in there are so just hard to believe, both technically and how much effort can be focused on a person, that I had to actually make a decision. I had to make a decision like, is this book true? Or is this an exaggeration or a delusion? Because you have to make that choice first, or at least somewhere along the book, because then after you accept that, then you have to, if you accept that it's true, you have to then go through and look at the various events that happen and somehow reconcile them in your own paradigm, in your own worldview. Which in the past, I've had guests on talking about various either supernatural or super spy or super soldier type stuff, which it was very hard for me to believe. And their actions and their personality and how they approach it, and that didn't help. It didn't help. So what I had is I just couldn't accept it. In this case, we have a lot of different story. We have a person who's a seasoned reporter who has done a lot of whistleblowing type research on things, having facts and figures, and this type of thing. Being a balanced person, doing reports. All this while this is going on in the background, she's doing reports on the show and doing reports for various places. All while this is going on, and is never pulled out the "I'm being victimized" card. I must be telling the truth because look at the things that are happening to me. That's a very common thing what I've had with guests. I got all these bad things happening to me. I must be telling the truth. You must believe me. And that was never used here with her. And this is my analysis on it. So I had to stop listening to the book. I'm listening to it. I'm going, man, I'm going to have to make a decision here. And I made the decision that it was true. And that I had to reconcile myself with some of the events. This interview, what I hope to do is to go over some of those things, as well as whatever Janet would like to talk to about the book, to try and get across to the potential reader of the book that this is really a serious book, and that when someone reads this book, realizing that the author is serious and there's a well-based background of her standing up against the system, that you'll have to either change your mind or you'll just have to reject it outright. And we'll talk about this, but some of the stuff I've talked to Janet about is where you've had people who've just simply almost ran away once they read the book from her. So with that long kind of intro, I want to mention that you can read her work both on her website, janetphelan.com, in which you can click on the link. I have a link too on the bottom to buy the book as well as see her work. She also is writing for New Eastern Outlook, and you can see we have very many articles that are available if you just click on the link, search for her name in the Google, and then you can go to New Eastern Outlook. You can also search for her there too, as well as these articles. And so let's actually, now that I have dry mouth from talking, let's bring on Janet Phelan. And Janet, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Well, I really want to thank you for doing this show, James. I do want to insert something initially to correct something you said.
Okay.
You say the book starts with my mother being put under guardianship, and it's actually pivotally, the book starts with an approach by a romantic approach by a federal agent who lures me into a relationship with him for the sole purpose of destroying my family. And this is an important distinction to make, and it is a distinction that separates me a little bit from the other guardianship abuse horror shows that are going on, because the situation that ended up happening to my mother with the guardianship was a planned federal operation involving a point person. They call them tightrope walkers. That's when you send a federal agent into a situation where you have to handle something up close and personal. So this Jack Smith federal agent who approached me, socially, romantically, did so as part of his mission and part of his job description. So this is, in a sense, what I think has made my experience, which I recount in Exile, to be quite a bit more, I'm trying to think of the right word here, has made my situation a little more difficult. When I say difficult, I'm sure that having read the book, I'm discussing, attempts on my life which rendered me into a coma and almost out of existence, and having to flee my country and so forth. So
I guess the reason why I looked at it that way is because it seemed to me that the center of the attacks was to at first, what it seemed to me was simply go after the money. Yeah. But
No, this was never about the money. There wasn't that much money. It was less than $1 million.
Well,
$800,000, $900,000. This was never about the money. This was only and always about murder. Now, the money on a level, because there were people to pay off, like my sister, Janet Phelan, who's now going under the name, she's gotten scared about all these things I'm saying and the books I'm writing, and she's going under the name of Anna Bloom, changed her name to kind of shed some of the taint of what she did. So there was, there were the lower level people who had to be paid off, like my sister, were certainly interested in the money. The money in the estate to go to my sister rather than, for my mother to spend it in her old age, or for me to inherit it. That was part of the original plan. But this conservatorship was not conceived as a reason, you know, as a raison d'etre to get, you know, the money.
Well,
it was, and I want to say something here, that what this really does bring to light is that it is very well known on a federal level that conservatorships, guardianships are fatal enterprises. And we are seeing that now play out, of course, in so many different cases. You know, what happened to Sylvia Bush, what happened to Corinne Bramson, what happened to Elizabeth Fairbanks, what happened to Raymond Horspool. The list of victims goes on and on. People who have basically died as a result of the actions taken by the guardian. So it is known that conservatorships are hazardous to your health.
Well, would it be unfair to characterize that this was I'm assuming that Melanie Scott, I think is the name of the person who was her only case was not your mother. I would imagine she had others. And I kind of looked at it as they pick someone, they bleed them of their money, and then kill them and move on. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at the ring.
Well, that's very often how it works. You know, the first attempt on my mother's life was only 6 months into the guardianship, and there was all kinds of money left. So this, you know, the MO was not that you just mentioned, you know, to bleed them dry and then, you know, either kill them with morphine or withhold medical care or whatever. That was not the MO. The MO here was kill her right away.
Well, then,
and the interesting thing is that attempt on my mother's life in June of 2002. There was evidence, you know, after I rushed my mother to the hospital where she was operated on, her life was saved. There was evidence left in the house of what could have certainly contributed to my mother's sudden cardiac distress. And so I you know, looked at my mother's medicine bottles. My mother had been on heart drugs. No one in the guardian's employ, no one had bothered to give my mother her heart medicine for a couple of months. There were the full undispensed bottles. I made a police report. The police lied on the police report. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And at every single level, in terms of the legal system, law enforcement, my attempts to bring the facts to light and to protect my mother's life at every single step, I met with obstacles. Obstacles which ended up being fatal to my mother. But it didn't stop then.
So, I mean, would you say that this was, let's say, I don't know what word to use, personal? That they chose an individual rather than someone who fit a category?
Oh, well, I think they chose an individual who fit a category. Yeah, I do. And I think they don't generally, when they launch guardianships, they don't trot in a federal agent to wine and dine and romance the adult child before the initiation, you know, months and months before there's even a guardianship in question. They don't do that.
Well, see, along the way, I've come up with a possible theory. We'll get to that because I want to go through the book to try and give some people, taste of it, so that we talk into theories and so on. We can there's something to go on. So at some point in the book, the Agent Smith leaves the picture. What did he accomplish? What was that whole relationship, and what was accomplished for him to, assuming, say, mission complete, or maybe it didn't get complete, and he had to leave because it wasn't going anywhere, their mission?
Well, the mission was complete insofar as my mother was put into the guardianship and taken and basically kidnapped. So my mother was taken care of. I was beginning to get suspicious of Agent Smith. As you know from reading the book, I was living with him for a period of time. I mean, the whining and dining got to that level. But I was becoming suspicious of him. And I think that the decision was made to cut him loose of me and then to deal with me. And as you know by reading the book, as soon as I left Jack and moved back into that little cottage I rented in Long Beach, my situation became absolutely perilous.
Why don't you tell us some of the perils?
Peril? You want to hear about peril?
The
perils of Phelan.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. I had spent a couple of days down in Riverside. Riverside was where my mother's guardian, Riverside Court was where the guardianship proceedings were taking place, and I was running into court, filing papers and trying to, get the judge to pay attention to the law. And I'd been in Riverside for a couple of days. I came home, and I had rented this cottage, and there were 3 cottages on the property, and there was the landlord's house in front. And I'm walking by the landlord's house back to my cottage, and I hear the landlady say, "Oh, she's here, quick, call the police." And so, that's, I think, why is she calling the police? So I go into my cottage, I open the door, and my cottage has been tossed. I mean, there's files, things everywhere. Now, most people, if they come home and they've been, subject to a burglary or a home invasion or something, they're going to call the police. But I'm thinking, wait a minute, the police are already coming. Why are they coming? So I'm looking around. I'm trying to figure out what's really happening, and I see among the chaos all these little pink pills all over the floor. I have no idea. They're not my pink pills. I don't know what they are, but it became very clear to me. I got drugs in my house, whatever they are. The police are coming because the landladies called them. I'm in trouble. So the book, goes into the steps that I took to secure the house and get rid of the drugs as quickly as possible, which I didn't manage to completely do by the time the police showed up. The police showed up, I had all the curtains drawn, the shades drawn. I was like, I pressed myself against, the wall in the bedroom, just like not breathing. They're going bang, bang, bang. And finally, they went away. I guess they wanted to catch me with the drugs, and they thought maybe I'd already left. So that was one. That was one peril. The house almost burnt down while I was asleep. That was another peril. There were the very first efforts at chemical assassination, and I do talk about a number of experiences with chemical assassination techniques and substances in the book. The first evidence of those happened right after I left Jack Smith. So it began to be something that I had never dreamed that I would have to experience.
Now, if I happen to skip ahead or miss something you wanted to talk about, just stop in there. But at some point, as I would say, as this spirals downward, you find yourself literally homeless.
Oh yeah, I ended up homeless. I ended up homeless on January 5th of 2003. On January 3rd of 2003, I was attacked with lethal intent by officers of the Long Beach Police Department. I was in a coma and in the hospital for a couple of days. I was released on January 5th. I came back I had left that little cottage where all these terrible things were happening at the very end of 2002. I'd moved out in December. Late December, I'd moved into a new apartment. I was thinking, oh, well, I finally got away from that witch of a landlady who's, doing all these problematic things. So I'd moved into a new apartment, and 2 days before the attack by the police. So I got out of the hospital on January 5th, came back to the apartment, and found that it had been rented to someone else, basically. That's basically the story. So I, at the age of 50, with with about maybe 90 cents in change in my pocket at that point, I hit the streets.
Well, I tell you, the section when you were homeless at that point, going through there, it's very interesting to hear it because you get a perspective from a journalist perspective of what it takes and what happens when you're homeless. How to survive, what do you do to survive, how does people manage, what do you have to look out for? You mentioned about it's always important to have a receipt, and I'm thinking, why? Well, to prove that you actually bought the item so you're not pinched and whatever that would mean, arrested, beaten, whatever, for not having the item, an excuse. I mean, these things just could never pop through my head. I was just in the...
Well, that's not a function of homelessness. That's another function of a rabid law enforcement team that is still really breathing down my neck. So I didn't run into other homeless people who were having that problem. The receipt trick. Okay, if you want to put somebody in jail, first of all, what is jail? Well, jail, as you know, you lose all your freedoms and your liberties, and you're not out there doing radio and writing articles and writing books like Exile, and you have been contained. And given the experience that I had on January 3rd of 2003, where I had been in police custody briefly, not for a crime, but in police custody, ended up in a coma. Jail can be also hazardous to your health. So there were multiple attempts at that point, different sorts of MOs to detain me. The drugs planted in the house was a prime example of that. The receipt trick. At one point, I ended up at Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson has now passed on. He's formerly the number 4 guy in the FBI, but at one point during this, the perils of Phelan, and during the period that I was homeless, I ended up, Ted came out to Santa Monica and picked me up and told me I was in grave danger and he's going to make me safe, and takes me back to Las Vegas, right? And which was not very safe, but we talked about this receipt business, and he was well aware of how law enforcement can use that. If they want to get somebody, they just want to stop somebody, what they're doing, get them, put them away. They will use the receipt trick. So you approach, whatever stores you want, you think that the target will visit, and you say, hey, don't give her a receipt, or give her a receipt with the wrong date. And that way, oh, she just shoplifted, the police come, they pick you. And there is a section in the book where the police did show up after I walked away from a fast food place without a receipt.
Now, if I can go back to Gunderson, now since, Gunderson has been infamous throughout interviews and books, both being the crusade against child pornography and all this stuff, and then himself being one of the people in it. There's an argument going on. Were you aware of who he was when he showed up first?
I was not. Well, I was not really aware of who he was. I was at that point trying to cope with being homeless with a big bullseye on my back, and I was speaking to different people in activist groups about what was happening to me and what could I do. And one of them said, oh, this is a job for Ted Gunderson. I said, well, who's Ted Gunderson? And they said, oh, well, here's his phone number and blah, blah. So I call him up, from a payphone in Santa Monica from the streets, and he, oh, yes, Janet Phelan. Oh, yes. Well, Janet Phelan, you're in grave danger, and I'm going to come to Santa Monica and personally take you back to Las Vegas so you'll be safe. That was my first introduction. Of course, now I know quite a bit more about Ted Gunderson. But
was it scary or alarming, or was it comforting that he knew you and of you, and you were in grave danger? I mean, it sounds like, at one hand, it'd be like, oh, great, finally, someone's going to help me here.
Exactly. Yeah, the white knight is coming from Las Vegas and on his steed to carry me to safety. Damsel in distress, absolutely.
But then on the other hand,
well, I want to say though, at that point, given all of the law enforcement hanky-panky that I had been experiencing, I did have some questions. And like when he said he was with the FBI, because I had, as the book details, I'd had several experiences at that point with the FBI, and I found them to be untrustworthy. So I said, well, that's great. You're going to come and rescue me. That's wonderful. But I said, give me a couple days. I want to check you out. I don't know anything about you. I don't know who you are. I want to check you out. So that's what I told Ted Gunderson. So it really was a kind of a split response, like, yay, but wait a second. Let me just check this out.
Well, then actually your account with him would support the view that he was in some way a bad cop. I mean, obviously, how he handled it.
Yes.
Which I would imagine would put you at odds with people who think he's a great guy. Have you met anybody? I know this is a tangent, but have you run into people who were Ted Gunderson fans, so to speak, who read your book or heard of what you were talked about and then became irate with you?
Well, it was actually not so much around the book, but it was before, when I decided a few years ago, before, actually it was quite a bit of time before Ted passed away, I decided to come forward about what he had actually done when he came to, quote unquote, carry me off to safety. And so when I began to talk and to write about this, I was approached in not very pleasant ways by several people who, thought that Ted Gunderson walked on water. Yeah.
Well, along the way, you are not bashful in naming names and providing all the documentation that you can to back up these things along the way. I mean, I find it amazing as I read this book and what you've gone through, how you were able to retain this evidence. This had to have been literally surgically implanted in you so you didn't lose it or have it be taken from you.
USB drive. Well, some of it I lost. Some of the evidence, unfortunately, I no longer have. But I did, when papers started disappearing from the house, I put papers, with friends, and then I, of course, started scanning and saving things onto, various devices, and then I started, as I began to progress through,
Well, some of the obvious things of being
putting things online and so forth. So some things were lost, but a lot were retained. Yeah.
Some of the more obvious things about being harassed by the police, and you mentioned about being almost killed and all that. Those are obviously bad things, but they kind of go along with the narrative. It's just these things happen. I accept them as I go along. What I found was odd was how when you developed, just relationship with people along the way. Just like for example, the truck driver who helped you, picked you up and helped you.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't know who you are. You know who he is. He's a nice guy. He's picking you up. He goes
nice.
Then all of a sudden he talks to somebody and he's all spooked and he's got to drop you off. Those things I found very interesting, very fascinating. How somebody can just be given that little talk and you turn into hot potato.
Well, it was an interesting thing about that truck driver, because that truck driver was going to Sierra Army Depot. So he was going into a federal military base. And he asked me, he said, well, this is like kind of a secret mission, like I gotta drop this. He said, you can't get any farther than, the entry sort of, they call it a lobby, I think, but it's basically just sort of a grassy area in front of a reception, He says, you can't go any further than this. So he went into the base and he was gone for several hours. So whatever happened, obviously he was talked to. I mean, he came back and he couldn't, he was so scared he didn't want me in the truck. He's telling me that I'm too hot to handle. I mean, none of that came from me. So it was part of my growing awareness that I really did have a bullseye on my back, and that the bullseye was federal in nature, and that it was becoming a bit of a pain, to have to deal with. Because as you saw in the book, there were other instances where I would, seek to maybe make alliances and so forth, or even just to get, during the period of being homeless, just trying to get, sort of normal assistance from these homeless centers, and finding that, oh no, you can't have a bag lunch. Here, this is bag lunch for you and you and you, but you can't have a bag lunch. There began to be targeting going on that was obviously not part of the normal day-to-day protocol. And it's been difficult, but
something like that. I can see where these shelters have relationships with the police, and in order to keep things peaceful, the police may, for whatever reason, pick out someone that special, let's say. But cases like with this truck driver, this guy dropped out of nowhere. There's no relationship with the police. There's no relationship with you. There's no relationship with your history. Just nowhere, and boom, that changed over. But then you have people who were friends of your father, who seemed to, when you would call, it seemed to me as the reader that the call would be like, the goal of the call is to get off the phone. Like to pretty much try to. It would
sometimes, I reached out at one point to Robert Mayhew, and Robert Mayhew had a lot of, he had a history, a career of intelligence work, and he knew my father when Mayhew was, for a period of time, the right-hand man for Howard Hughes, and my father had written a lot of articles and a couple of books about Howard Hughes. And so when all this stuff is beginning to happen with my mother, I'm desperately like, who can help? And I think, I'll call Bob Mayhew. So I call him out there, and also in Vegas, and he's very concerned and very helpful, and we correspond for a bit, and then all of a sudden then I got attacked by the police, and I recontacted Mayhew, tried to, when I was out in Las Vegas at Gunderson's. I was at Gunderson's just for a few days, and I had actually remembered Bob Mayhew's address because I'd written him some letters, and went over there, and at that point he really didn't want to talk to me. So it became clear to me that whatever was going on, and as you know, I do come to some conclusions about what was really going on with all this. Whatever was going on was fairly high level, and people were really being effectively dissuaded from being helpful. To give an example, I spent, after I finally got off the streets after that extended period of time, I left Los Angeles and rented a cheap place up in North Idaho, and I made friends there with a paralegal who was really very interested in what I was saying about what was happening in this court case, and very interested. I was beginning to write about this horrible reconfigurations of the water systems, where they basically weaponized the water system so they could, if they chose, use them as a delivery system. And I was working on that. And this guy was really interested in all this. And he actually wrote me a letter about what happened. He was the only person who decided that he was going to commit this to writing. So he's leaving his place, out in the country in Idaho. He's hitching into town. He sticks out his thumb. An SUV rolls up, and he gets in and finds himself in the company of several federal agents, and they want to talk to him about what he's doing with Janet Phelan. So he did put this, he did write this, and they really wanted not only to talk to him, they wanted to make sure that whatever he was doing with Janet Phelan, which was mostly like trying to construct legal papers for what was happening in Riverside Court, that he stopped doing it, and they were very persuasive, apparently. They threatened him, okay? So.
Yeah, because I have theories that there are people who go into government, for example, who are going in there with, good intent. They want to change things or make a difference or do whatever. And they, once they get there, they get that little talk, as I said, take them in the back room and they give them a talk on facts of life. And at that point, they have to decide that if they're going to stay in, they got to be a team, play with them, play along with them, or they should leave. And perhaps even blackmail stuff is put together and so on. It's not a unique story. I mean, you hear about this from cults, from whether it be the Latter-day Saints to the worst cases, I guess, are in the Scientologists, those who, so on. Your mic's off. So there is, I can see that, I can see where this stuff would happen. Yeah, what I am still fascinated by is why this is happening to you. What is the golden egg that you're carrying, or the special key or whatever that would warrant this kind of attention? As you mentioned, the money wasn't really enough. It was something to help along the way. It doesn't, to have federal
the people. Money, the money, was essentially distributed to pay off, intended to pay off, my sister for her silence, and and Melody Scott for her murderousness and so forth. The money didn't go into the just federal treasury.
It was part of the grease of the machinery of this operation.
It was for the lower level. It was for the lower level operators. So the money was not the motive.
Yeah. So as a reader, I'm going along, and first off, I mentioned in an opening, from seeing your other work and seeing how you handled yourself with all this stuff, and reading the extent of what happened, not knowing the extent of it, from talking with you both on the air and off. It's not like you're walking around wearing wearing this as a badge of something. And I'm reading this and I'm going like, so I have to go through this book and go like, why? And I was kind of hoping along the way, but I already know you, and I know it's still ongoing technically. So I'm kind of go, why? And so that's what I spent a lot of my time afterwards, kind of trying to figure things out. But as you're going through this now, you've got this homeless stint in which you did some great survival stuff, the attacks and all these things. Where at one point in this book, where have you started to, like, if I can use the term, you've came out of homelessness? You had mentioned about having places to actually stay that was yours as you traveled and so on. And then it seemed like it was starting to maybe come around a little bit. I mean, did you feel that way along the way, that maybe you're out of the darkest part, or no?
That's a very deep question, actually. Coming out of homelessness and renting, having a roof over my head was an enormous relief. The other kinds of assaults began to ramp up. I mentioned earlier that I've dealt extensively now, unfortunately, been the recipient of chemical assassination attempts, and they have become quite a bit stronger, occurring more frequently. At some point, I made, as I mentioned in the book, I made as many outreaches as I could to what I thought were the appropriate parties to get some help dealing with this. I went to the ACLU. I filed complaints with the Internal Affairs. I filed a report with the U.S. Department of Justice. I filed a report with the California Department of Justice. I figured I went everywhere. And at some point, I said to myself, okay, I have terrible things happening to me, but I'm still alive. And I still have, I still have the marbles left in my head, and I've got I think a bird's eye view as to what's going on in this country, that the country, those in power don't want people to know about. So I have whatever modest journalistic skills I have. I did my undergraduate and graduate school training in the field. I mean, the best I can do with this situation is to write, document, and publish. So I made what was really a conscious decision at that point in time to take all the personal distress about, coming home and finding that somebody's dumped organophosphates into, an open container of grape juice. The gagging, the throwing up. I just decided that I'm going to compartmentalize. That stuff is happening. I acknowledge it's happening. I am surviving it. So, I'm going to take whatever skills I have and use them as I believe God intended me to.
Well, let's go to the chemical assaults. Another thing that when I was reading about it, it seemed to me, let me just say this now at this point, maybe I'll get it on. It seemed to me that either if they wanted you dead, you would have been, or there was something intervening that prevented it on your behalf. Luck would be the atheist view, but I would say
there's been a lot of luck.
It seems like there'd be some, angel on your shoulder, which why they wouldn't stop it, I don't know, but it seemed, I realized that the government is inept and so forth, right? I understand there's a bunch of people who, when you're a thug, you're going to deteriorate emotionally and psychologically from being a thug. And if you're high enough up, you're pretty good at it, and you're detached, and you're pretty evil, and you're detached from it. But it seems that the attacks, if there would have been death, that was okay. But it seems almost like that the attacks were A, experiments on you, and B, kind of like seeing if the rat can get through the maze. And if the rat died along the way, well. But almost like you getting through it would have been fascinating to the people who are watching you.
Well, I've thought a lot about this too. It's like, you're sleeping outside. I mean, for a woman, 3.5 years sleeping outside as a homeless person, that in itself is peril. And I would say a prayer before I fell asleep every night, and I'd wake up in the morning, sometimes having had an event during the night. I discuss the various means of chemical attacks in the book, I wake up and it's like, wow, I'm alive. It's like, ooh, I made it through another one. What I really think is that decisions were made. I think decisions were made after the Gary Webb debacle in 2004. Gary Webb had been a reporter with the San Jose Mercury News and had been doing some really, aggressive reporting. Started off with, the CIA, reporting on the CIA funneling drugs into the inner city, and then he got. My understanding is that he got involved in the DNA weapons story and was visiting Michael Riconosciuto in prison. And Gary Webb was reported as committing suicide after shooting himself in the head twice. Now, this is very embarrassing because, frankly, anyone with two brain cells to rub together doesn't believe this. And I think that there were decisions made at that point to stop shooting people because I think the Gary Webb situation just kind of, it was a big embarrassment. I think I have looked, I have searched for others who have had the kinds of weapons that I have had used against me, used against them. I have run into a couple who have not people who are reporting similar things, but not with the frequency with which I'm reporting them, and they're having a lot of trouble. Their health has been very impaired, but in general, I'm not finding very much, and I suspect that these weapons, for example, they've got heart attack chemicals, and they can go in your house when you're not there, and they can spray them on your clothes, and you come in, and you get up and get up in the morning, you take a shower, put on your dress, and go into like a hypertensive crisis. I mean, these chemicals have, you can find out about them. They have a history. They are used by intelligence agencies. So, one just becomes very careful. One does a lot of washing. You might want to wash your clothes the night before you put them on. I mean, whatever. One just takes whatever steps one feels one needs to take to make oneself safe. And has my health been impacted by this? Very seriously. I am very reluctant to, go into the hand-wringing perils of Pauline, perils of Phelan, but, I have kidney problems. Kidneys, of course, are there to filter through toxins. I have kidney problems that are rather serious now. I've got other health issues. I'm doing the best I can.
On the side, I'm doing a research project on C60, which is a carbon molecule that looks like a Buckminster Fuller house, buckyball they're calling it. And there is, in Russia, that's been going on. I'm telling you this, like, you might want to look into this. In Russia, they've been doing this for years. They suspend these C60 molecules in olive oil, and they ingest them, and they are ravagely, incredibly efficient at removing everything from toxins and metals to being an antioxidant. This could be the greatest discovery. And right now in Russia, they're in actual clinical trials with it because it's been a legend. And they figured out certain spas that Peter Great, for example, built a spa. This is a healing spa. It turns out the water is going through the shungite, which is a type of a carbon deposit, which has a high percentage of these C60. So I'll send you the documentation on that. You might want to look into that since you're in a virtually consistent spray. Now, back to the idea that the reason why I put forth the possibility of if you died, fine, but is that it seems that they whoever they could get the job done. I mean, you put on the news and you hear people are dead all the time, and you've done a lot of work and research stuff, but you're not on New York Times. You're not on the Saturday Night, the headline news. Oh, what a shock! You're hiding in Mexico, which I think would actually make it easier. I'm
not hiding. I am not. Number one, I am not hiding, and number two, I'm very much in plain sight. I mean, I do your show. I regularly do KBOO in Portland, Oregon. I do all kinds of other radio shows. My articles are getting published everywhere, and with the publication of the book, I think it's become fairly obvious that that I am at risk. And if I were to end up with a bullet in my head, they'd have themselves an instant martyr. Well, who was that, Janet Phelan? I think I read something about it. What is it she's really saying? What is it she was saying? I mean, I don't think so. I think they're going with the slow. Well, it does appear to be a slower kill of chemical weapons. I suspect that I come from very strong stock. My people tend to be very long-lived and very healthy, and I also pray a lot. So
now, you do talk about in the book about going to Israel.
Yeah.
And did you I'm actually kind of like trying to get my memory now. Did you go there to for recreation? Did you go there? Did you go there to seek for help? I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember what drove you to go there.
Doesn't have a lot of recreation. I went while I was homeless. I'd come into some money, and I was, as you know from the book, I had made a sort of an abortive a flight, for safety to Mexico and to Guatemala early on after all this started, and realizing that my problem was following me, I kind of reluctantly came back to the U.S. But when I left in 2004 for Israel, I was again thinking that there was going to be a location on this planet where there might be some, concern about what I'm saying, about, the impetus behind what happened to my family, what happened to my mother and to me, and also some, possibly support, acknowledgement of the work I was doing. Because at that point, I was, although homeless, I was doing a lot of radio, I was writing a lot for publication. And I was, for me, it was, my 10-day trip to Tel Aviv was really a part of my journey of discovery. And it did force me to really reassess, and I think reassess far more accurately my original perception of what Israel is really all about.
The government you're referring to? I mean, the government of Israel?
Yeah, the government, yes.
So, yeah, you were looking to have some kind of help, I would imagine, in this, and you did.
No, I was looking for a place to live. I was looking for a place to live where I wasn't going to be attacked.
Yeah.
On what was becoming now almost a daily basis in terms of chemical.
Because I bring it up because you everywhere you seem to go, the responses followed you very quickly, if not instantaneously, and that's one of the things I saw in the book that I was like. I mean, she goes to Guatemala, Israel, Canada, back to Mexico, different areas, and it's like right away there's stuff happening. So they had a real time.
There's a time lag, but it's not very long. And one of the things I discuss in the book, and actually I think I recently emailed you. Well, I'll start that in a minute. One of the things I discuss in the book is during that period of unconsciousness, when I was in the hospital in Southern California after the January 3rd of 2003 assault by officers of the law, one of the things that happened was I picked up a chip. And the chip, I became aware that my movements were being tracked, and I sought out first a bug sweeper, and then I also, got myself an X-ray, and the bug sweeper affirmed that the chip was in my chest, and the X-ray, the first X-ray, located it in my lung. I recently had another X-ray done, and son of a gun, chip's still there in my lung. I actually emailed it to you, James. I'm not sure if you got it or not.
Yes, I did. And actually, while you're doing it, I'm feverishly looking to find it. I can quickly put it up on the screen. So continue with. Okay,
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So the bug sweeper explained to me that the chip was transmitting, and that's how he could pick it up. And he gave me a device that he said I could carry around with me, and it would sort of light up when the chip was being accessed. Now, at that point, I was in Los Angeles, and there's so much, you're being bombarded with signals and so forth. And it seemed to me that little pen was lighting up every few seconds. But even when I went off onto the beach or up into the mountains, it looked like it was lighting up more than once a minute. So the bug sweeper explained to me that, there would be an effort to access, kind of the chip, triangulate, where is this person now? So, and then that's how the signals were being, that's how I was being tracked. So, yeah.
Yeah, I did locate, there it is. I did locate the picture. I'm going to see if I can work this out.
Actually, I've got several of them, but I did send you one. Yeah. And you can see it in It's actually in the right lobe, but it's on the left-hand side of the screen.
This will work as there. Oh, there we go. Worked out nice.
It's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to kind of point it out because.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can zoom in.
Can you point it out?
A little bit.
Because it's there on the left-hand side. Yep. There you see it.
Right there.
You see that? Yep. There it is.
Yeah.
And I went, after I got the X-ray, I took this to a doctor. He goes, well, because I've had some pneumonia recently. He says, well, looks like the other lung, which is actually the one on the right-hand side, which is the left lung. It looks like you've got a little bit of inflammation there. He goes, what's that dot over there? What is that? I go, oh, we don't have to pay any attention to that. He goes, well, what is that dot? I don't know what that dot is. I said, it's ordnance. He goes, ordnance? Yeah, it's a military term. I go, yeah, it's ordnance. I got it in the war. I'm not trying to change the subject, Well, I did get it in the war, so to speak. So,
of course, if you would have told them, you would have lost yet another doctor,
Yeah, well, no.
And that's because I was interested. I'm glad you told the story like you did, because I was thinking like any doctor is going to see that, they're going to go, whoa, wait a minute,
Right. Right.
Because that's their job, is to see things that aren't normal in the body,
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So as I with the tracking and all this stuff now, how do you think that chip is read? If you're going to these places, I mean, I know if you're walking into a public arena, there might be a reader of some type, but if you're in a remote village.
No, these are either satellite or drone accessible. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be something up close. That's how they do it.
Still, I mean, it's fascinating. Again, the recurring theme is that I know that they can find anybody or do anything. It's how much resources can be allocated for them. And I'm still fascinated by how much resources you are drawing. I mean, you're very interesting to them. Very interesting to them.
I want to make something really clear here. When this all started with this approach by the federal agent in 2000. Okay, this is when this all started. And I want to make this really clear. There was nothing interesting about me. There was nothing special about me. My mother fit a certain demographic. And, and I do believe that we had gotten more or less on the radar because of my father's journalistic work. Well, growing up, we knew the phones were tapped. My father would go down to the payphone to make his journalistic phone calls and so forth, because it was common knowledge. I mean, the phone's tapped, right? Back then, the technology wasn't so good, You'd pick up the phone and there'd be this like whirring and clicking, and, I thought it was funny. I used to make, I was a kid, I was 9, 10 years old. I'd be making these jokes like, hey, J. Edgar, you're on the line now. Hey, J. Edgar, still wearing that dress? I mean, because he was a cross-dresser, right? I mean, I knew that because long before the movies, came out on Hoover. I mean, I knew that because of my dad's work. So, I mean, so we were on the radar. We were on the radar for decades. And so, I think that this was not in any sense launched because Janet Phelan's such a dynamite investigative reporter. No. In 2000, Janet Phelan wasn't working. Janet Phelan was having a lot of medical problems and was on disability and was pretty much just low-hanging fruit. So my father had passed away in '97, basically clearing the scene from the dynamic kind of protective energies that my father was able to put to use. So this did not happen because I was special, because I was important, because I was smart, because I knew something. I simply fit a demographic, and that was all. So I really, want to make that clear. This is
well. I think from as me, the reader, and I would imagine others, that this question is important because it would sort of bring it's like you need a reason. Like people talk about 9/11 and why would they possibly be involved in this? And there's a lot of reasons. You can give them all. I mean, I just used an extreme example, but there's reasons that somebody shoots somebody and takes the gym shoes. There's a reason, and so forth. And as I was reading this and I was thinking about it, mostly afterwards, I did a lot of thinking on this. Just to say that this book has caused me to do a lot of thinking. I mean, I've read other books, but because what I'm saying is that I've dealt with guests and so on who say things that are outrageous. There's a lot of people who are out to get them. Helicopters over their houses and all kinds of stuff, right? And they always use it to kind of give themselves credibility and so on. Well, you're not doing this. And the stuff you're talking about aren't as, let's say, sexy as having a helicopter fly over your house or something like that. These are very degrading things and very, very bad things that are happening and so on. So I had to kind of juggle this around. It's like, well, she's telling the truth. She's not delusional, okay? And she's telling it in her style as a journalist as best she can, as both detached but also being involved in it. I think you did a great job in writing the book.
Oh, thank you.
About yourself, which it's hard to do without.
Yes, it's very hard to do.
So I'm going to throw this out there. I mean, if this is too early, we can continue. I'll talk about other things in the book if you need to. But I was thinking that, and you mentioned it has something to do with your father, perhaps in his work, and not your mother. I'm thinking that there's something about your lineage, let's say, that is important. And I don't know what that is. I'm just throwing this out there because it seemed like that there was an interest in your resilience rather than your death. And that there is an interest in how you handled things. And both, on one hand, toying with you, but on the other hand, observing you. And I don't know if you want to address any of this, but it seems to me that there's something about you, not personally, but specifically, and it might actually have to do with the genetics. Now, you talked before about genetic weapons is one of the stories you've done, on it, and specific targets and so on like that. And
they've used genetic weapons against me, and I make this clear in the book too. So,
maybe give us an example of one of the genetic weapons. Maybe you can give us an example of one of the ones you're calling a genetic weapon.
Oh, this gets very complicated. I really, I don't have the. I mean, if they grab your DNA, and they can do it very easily, all they have to do is, get saliva off a cup, hair off a hairbrush. Jack Smith had ample opportunity, to get all kinds of samples of my DNA. But if they get something like that, they can fashion a biochemical substance, okay, that will basically only affect the target.
Or at least the close genetic members in that group. I mean, maybe not specifically one person, but at least family, we'll say. Let's talk for a minute, away from my situation. Let's talk about a situation where it looks like the powers that be have actually constructed a genetic weapon to use against a group of people. And I've been doing quite a bit of reporting recently about Dr. Vuder Bassan, who is now facing quote-unquote sentencing by the Health Professions Council in South Africa after skating through criminal court, where he was charged with over 220 murders, embezzlement, fraud, drug trafficking, whatever, in South Africa. He is finally being held, his license, his medical license is being, is considered possibly to be revoked in South Africa. Vuder Bassan was head of Project Coast during the apartheid government in South Africa. Project Coast was their biological and chemical warfare unit. And he was a medical doctor at that time too, which is what gives that Health Professions Council a
the dominion to possibly revoke his medical license. So one of the things that he was allegedly working on was creating a blacks-only bioweapon. That would be a chemical substance that would only affect people of color. And it is my understanding, after interviewing people, scientists who worked alongside Bassan, and also members of various intelligence communities, that it is very possible that Bassan developed a substance that would attach onto melanin. Darker skinned people have more melanin than lighter skinned people. And that this substance would cause diabetes and hypertension. And if you look at the rates of diabetes and hypertension in people of color since the 1980s, which is when Bassan was allegedly doing his mysterious research, you will see that we basically now have epidemic proportions of this disease constellation in people of color. Now, how could this happen? Well, it could be leaked into processed food. And if you look at, for example, if you look at people in areas of Africa that are industrialized, people living in the cities, for example, you will see the huge amounts of rates of these silent killer diseases. If you look at people in Africa who are still living in their native villages and eating indigenous food sources, not processed food, you do not find these rates. So the question concerning Bassan is this, did he actually accomplish this, or is this what they call the Coca-Cola syndrome? You know, you take a kind of physically naive and unimpacted population that does not have experience with, foods that are drenched in corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, and so forth, and you suddenly expose them to Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, all that kind of stuff, and is this actually the natural response of peoples who have not had that experience? It's what I meant by the word naive. That experience with those kinds of food sources. So is it the Coca-Cola syndrome, or is it something more nefarious?
I'm noticing that he has been convicted on 67 counts.
No, he was not. He was acquitted of all counts. He was acquitted. The judge in Pretoria High Court acquitted him of everything. The judge in the High Court, when he was held on the criminal charges, was considered. The prosecutors thought the judge was not impartial, that the judge was acting as, shall we say, a quarterback for Buddha Bassan, and they tried to have the judge removed from the case. The judge refused to step down. There were over 150 witnesses against Buddha Bassan in this case, and he was the sole witness in his defense.
Oh, I see.
And he skated on all the charges.
But he was found guilty of what was it? Misconduct.
That's the Health Professions Council, right?
Misconduct.
After misconduct, right? When he was originally arrested, I think it was in 1999, he had over 1,000 ecstasy tablets on him. I mean, he was allegedly involved in drug trafficking, as well as, all the other kind of hanky-panky he had been doing. He was, according to the witnesses at the trial, he was involved in multiple assassinations of enemies of the state of South Africa. So this is what Teflon means, right?
Yeah.
And why would he have Teflon? And it's, I think it really does further the concerns that he was successful in developing this, eugenics, genocidal kind of weapon, because he is so well protected. I mean, he's not being found culpable for anything. He shows no remorse. He laughs about what he does. what he has done. So, but back to the subject.
Yeah.
This is an example of a genetic weapon that there's only two modes that I think that they operate in. You can either find something common to a group, a racial group, such as the melanin issue, and fashion a race-specific gene weapon, or you can find something that is, you can cull an individual's DNA and make an individual kind of designer gene weapon against an individual.
Because the way I've come from this is, I'm looking at what they're doing with you. Basically, is you are a lab rat for these type of weapons, specifically picking you for a reason. I think at least one of the reasons is your resiliency. So if they can finally get you, they've got a good weapon. Now the question would be, what about you or your ancestry or your ethnicity do you think would be the general target? Do you think this is...
I don't agree. I don't buy that, James. I don't buy that.
That you're being a lab rat?
Well, maybe to some extent I am, but I think that the kinds of aggression, that I have experienced, which have involved, people pointing guns at me. There were two it's not in the book. The car bombs are not in the book, but there were two attempts at car bombs. This is not. I don't think that this is just a grand experiment.
There might be multiple factions involved. Like I say, there's. It's not that they want to keep you alive. It's that while you're alive. Because here's why I say these things: is because I find it very hard to believe that any one person on this planet, if enough power wanted them dead, won't be dead. There's two people alive that have avoided obvious assassinations. In fact, one just died, so maybe he didn't, from Venezuela, and Castro. But it's not like they're walking around unarmed out in the world. They're behind a fortress, let's say, of protection and so forth. But it seems that to me that either supernatural help and or biogenic help is keeping you alive.
Well, I believe very much in supernatural help. And frankly, the conclusions that I come to in Exile are as to, what is the geopolitical agenda behind what the United States is doing, not only domestically, but, in the international arena. As you know, my conclusions are not very popular. They run directly counter to a lot of the anti-Zionist verbiage that we're hearing. They run directly counter to certainly to the propaganda of the United States, which works in a multiplicity of venues, not only through Barack Obama's public speeches, not only through the mainstream media, but the alternative, the quote-unquote independent media, is highly contaminated and infiltrated by a number of spooks. So I think that the conclusions I come to, and I lay them out in the epilogue, after I tell the story, this is what happened, this is what happened to my mother, this is what I went through. The conclusions I come to, I think, are rather individual. If there's anything unique about me, it's the conclusions I've come to here. And I think that my voice, I think that there is an attempt to silence my voice, given what I really do believe is the ultimate aim and agenda of the powers that be. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to write the book, and that I got it published, and that it is out there now, and people can make of it what they will. But I'm not.
Well, let me bring up something else then, because one of the things I've noticed in this book is I think there is a higher intelligence, spiritual intelligence working in it. And this could be, this is my words. This is how I think of. This is my worldview. We have a higher source, if you will, in ourselves. We have a higher consciousness.
We all,
yeah, right.
I believe we all do. And we either nurture it and allow it entry, or we try to block it off. I absolutely agree with that.
And the only reason why I think that let's say that there is a formula in this book that may be beyond your conscious knowledge, but is coming from you nonetheless, parts of you, is that when someone reads the book, they have to make a decision. Now, if they just blow it off, a lot of people do that, fine, or they just accept it. To me, both are really not acceptable. I think what's included in there, because I've watched reaction to people who have listened to your work, not even just this book, but the writing and your work. And you've told me people who you've gave the book to in the media, and they were all nice and fine until all of a sudden they read the book, and the next thing you know, they range from, well, I'll get back to you, to running away from you.
Yeah.
And barring an actual visit by somebody, let's just rule that out at the moment. Something in that book hits somebody. Now, I think that, in my opinion out there, if you are moderately successful in the world, and I'm talking about like financially, or you're important, or some kind of power position, you have to play ball with the world. I mean, if you are literally for truth and honesty and love and all this stuff, you can't succeed in the world. And I know there's people out there who might be well off saying, well, yeah, like I did. Maybe you want to reconsider, or maybe you're not aware of some of the things that have transpired in your finances, let's say. People invest in stocks and they get returns. They don't know what's going on in the stocks. You know, they're outsourcing to Africa, they're laying off people and all this, and look at the good return they got, and they don't see it. So I'm just, without getting too off field. So I'm thinking in this book is something that unlocks some kind of connection to somebody's inside. And for a second, they're like, they get this window, and they don't like what they're seeing, and they got to close it, and they got to blame you. I mean, I've had this happen to me sometimes in the past. So I'm trying not to lay myself or my interpretation on what things are, but there's a formula in this book that when someone reads this, they can't walk away unmoved. It's like when these may be bad examples, they're good in what I'm trying to mean. It's like if you were a fan of like wrestling, and then you find out that it's staged. Can you go back to watching wrestling like it used to be? Or if there's a guy who's a magic trick, he does magic, but you find out how you do the magic, can you still appreciate the trick like you used to do? And I think that when people read the book and they see, it's like almost like the movie The Matrix, the best thing I can come up with. The Matrix, to me, that's there between, we'll say, government, power. Let's say power and evil. That when you see that, you start to examine the relationship with power and evil, and that you have to try to make a choice. Am I going to continue on kind of blindly going through the world and taking the advantage of power? It's like if you were friends with the Don, you lived in his neighborhood, you had no problems in your neighborhood. You know, he took care of everything. The mob took care of things, except they're out killing people too. So I think that when someone reads the book, there's a knee-jerk reaction. I've had people say, no surprise to you, they said, I think she's a Zionist agent. And I'm like, what? I'm like floored. It's like, where did that come out? And there's nothing in here to show that.
There's nothing there to show
absolutely
that.
Nothing.
No. Right.
And so, to me, I'm going like, where did it come from? It came from inside. There was something in here that triggered them. So it might not even be related to the topic. It might not be related to anything. There are people who I've discussed, and they've listened to stuff. Their reaction is that you're lumped in with the super soldiers type of a person, and so on. And I'm going like, all the work that she's done, it's pretty well grounded. This isn't like, I went to Mars and I was studying on Mars with Barack Obama, which is one of the super soldiers said thing. I mean, this is all. So to see those reactions come out of people, some of which are pretty intelligent, I'm like, I don't respond to them, because I think what I just witnessed is what I said. There's some kind of thing. I think you have this in you in and of yourself, whether it be your book, whether it be speaking like on the radio, there's something coming out of you that when it comes out, if the person has something wrong with them inside in that relationship, it rubs them in there. And of course, they have to get rid of you. Now, if you think about what happened in your life, the truck driver, all these people,
Yes.
all those people, all those people may have been doing their job. In the case of the truck driver, maybe he really was an innocent guy, but when it came down to it, he dropped you. When it came down to it, he didn't stand up for an innocent person. So I don't know. What do you think about you having something about you that goes out there and actually shines a light on a person's heart, even though you may not intend to do that in the actual literal text of what you're doing?
There's this wonderful song by Bob Dylan, "You Gotta Serve Somebody."
Yeah.
You know the song? Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, when these things began to happen in my life, what became very clear to me was the difference between right and wrong. And when I became homeless, I lost everything. There wasn't any status to hang my hat on. There wasn't any, there wasn't any public persona left. I had been stripped, down to nothing. But what I was keenly aware of and became more and more and more aware of as I began to walk through this was that what I had left was my own innate decency. And I could either choose to nurture it or I could discard it. And the real choice that I made was to simply, keep my focus on what was right and to try my darndest to fulfill that. So the world we live in, it's a very deceptive world. It looks so beautiful, and there's all these goodies, and you can go to the mall and you can buy all kinds of neat stuff and get big houses and the parties. There's so much that's put in our way to basically get us off track. And the way I read it now is, we're at the precipice. We're a lot of us are going to lose our lives, not just our lives, but lives, if the people in power, go through with what they're going to do. So, what good are those parties? What good are those big houses? You come in here. This is such a cliche, and I hate to, just pull up this cliche, but you come into this world with nothing. You leave with nothing except the accumulated weight of what you have put on your soul. That's it. So, when I ended up with nothing and nowhere to hang my public persona, this was what I had left, and this is what became clear to me, that this was what was important.
Well, what comes to mind is when I hear the story here of your and I was looking for this to read it specifically because I'm not good at memorizing, but I get the point of things. Is Jesus was talking about to the crowd about what really counts as far as being godly, whatever. And it says, when the judgment comes, people will be let in because they fed him when he was homeless, they helped him when he was in jail, visited him in jail, and so forth, and all this stuff. And then they said, well, when did we do that? When did we actually do this for you? And he said, it's because you did it to the least of these. And those who were pious and thought they were great, he said, you're out because you did not do these things. And when you hear somebody who is homeless, when they're being attacked, and with that, and you turn your back on them, now that person may be a good person, but that person has brought to a point where they went to the point and they said, the cost is too high to follow those principles. And so they've turned away. And part of them have suffered because of that. Some of them are just committing to evil. Some of the people have introduced them. They actually were introduced to their weak side, and they shied away from it, and they're shamed by it. And probably throughout their life, that part there is something turned, something went a little sour in their lives. And then you have the people who actually have gotten through all these things and are still doing it. You're not out stealing from people to do things. You're being your decent person while under these conditions. You are the homeless one. You have been hungry. You've been in jail. You've been accosted. And yet you're still a nice person. You're still nice to your neighbor, to your friend. You would help somebody who needs help. I mean, this to me, I think it's almost like that is why you are here, is you are one of the witnesses of doing the right thing. And it's not that you get up to do that. It's not like, yes, I'm going to be a witness. I mean, you just simply lived a life, and even what you just said there shows it. And I think that is, I think after all said and done, that is going to be the story that shines on. And there's people like you all over doing their things. Some even in not even having any kind of book or interviews to show it or whatever. But these are the backbone of the real good on earth, these type of people. You was able to bring to light something, and even now, even though they're not the person reading that book, even though they're not standing next to you when you need help, they're still reading that book, and they're making a choice to reject it. It's the same thing as if you were there asking for help, and they said no. So I could see this. This is this cutting the bone from the marrow aspect of it. This is this real world spirituality that's coming out there saying, like, this is what it is to really take on that, to follow Christ. And I'm not even saying that you're doing that consciously in being a Christian or not. It's the point of that you're actually doing the work. You're doing it, and you've come through it to this point. And the dark side has tried to nail you again and again. I mean, they would have succeeded if you had become embittered and gave up and said, "To hell with it," and started drinking or doing drugs and just saying, "Ah, hell with it." They would have won, and yet you didn't. And so this is how I read into why your story is here. It's free choices by people in your life, including you, to have created your life. But what the benefit from it is somebody actually walking the walk and walking the talk under fire, and then those who won't do it, even if it means a little help. So that's kind of how I look at it. I think that is the goal. That is the result of the book, an unconscious result, let's say, for both you or the reader. But that's kind of how I look at it. You got your mic off. There we go.
Yeah, I just unmuted it. Well, life got very challenging, and I simply had to make some decisions, and I was helped along a lot. When I was 38 years old, I had this sort of flash out of the blues spiritual experience. I don't know hardly how to describe it. It just came out of nowhere. It wasn't prompted by anything. I walked around for about 2 or 3 weeks just filled with the absolute conviction of an enormous source of love that had touched my life. And I never tried to categorize it. I never, I try to avoid religious labels, but the effect of that experience was to really hone my consciousness about what was right and what was wrong. Because frankly, up to that point in time, I was a material girl, I was living in the material world, and I wasn't giving that much thought to the impact of what I did, of my decisions, of nothing like that. And this experience kind of, it almost really physically picked me up and put me down on another road entirely. And if that experience had not happened in my life, I would have not been able to withstand, what began to happen to me after Jack Smith entered my life. And the other thing is, I believe in death. I believe in death as a termination point for this existence. And when I pass that termination point, I believe that there are certainly other types of existences that I don't have personal knowledge of. But while I'm here, once I hit that termination point, that's it. So while I'm here, I have the opportunity, and the opportunity is finite. There will be a termination point. So what am I writing? What am I writing in the book while I'm here? Am I writing, I conned somebody off of something and I got this off of somebody, and aren't I pretty today? Is that what I'm writing? Or am I writing something else? So, the understanding that life does have an end, and that I am the one who has, the opportunity to make the choices to fill my life with, one thing or another is, frankly, I don't think I can stand this if it went on forever, James.
Yeah, well,
you know what I'm saying? So,
the rich and powerful are looking into downloading their brains into robots and live forever. And, you realize the reality of life that, but see, by what we're doing here, and any religion will say this in as many words as what you sow you reap, we're setting up our stuff for the next level. So if you want to say the next level is going up, meaning more opportunities, more power, or meaning that you don't have to worry about, food or whatever, you get to the next level, you can do it on the positive sense, creative, helping one another, or you could prepare down here so you go up to the next level in the negative sense, which is you're going to be more. You're going to be in a world where you're going to have nothing but predators. You're going to have fighting, and you're going to be able to live a longer life. You won't die as easily, so you can't just kill yourself. This is where, and for people who do it consciously, well, that's fine. But it's even more amazing for someone to, without having that goal of, well, I'm going to do good here, so the next life, but just because you should do good here, period. That just shows the depth of someone who really gets it. And so many will come from the east and west who will be at the table with Abraham, but the sons of the kingdom will be thrust out. And so the people who are all big holy rollers and doing all this stuff, but aren't actually living the life out there and, doing it. And this is where I think, I don't know how you'll be rewarded in this life, but you've got a nice sack waiting for you in the next one, if that's any conversation. But I'm hoping that the shows and stuff like we're doing here will get this information out so that people can get these choices and have these matrix awareness moments from your books and your writing to make that choice and realize that you have to make that choice now, because when you die, when you're terminated, your choice has already been made.
I'm having a hard time. I have certain things that are happening now on a regular basis that are really very unpleasant. And I have learned, I have these moments of just glorious happiness that I never experienced before all this started. I live up in the mountains here in Chiapas, and I'm above a city, and it's really beautiful up where I am, and I can walk around in the forest and listen to the birds, and I don't know, and I can get so happy just doing these things, and I think one of the things that has happened too is that even though I feel that I'm carrying a lot, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I also have this feeling of incredible lightness, like I have, you know, the material girl, you know, that I was, who wanted to do clothes and then do this and then do that. I mean, I've dropped that burden, and it's made me a lot lighter. So.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to bring up on this? We got into a, kind of a spiritual discussion there or whatever, but that's what I think the book does. I mean, that's what I'm telling you. So, I mean, that's why I can see where I go there. But is there anything you want to bring up?
I'm glad the book does that, because, I'm hoping that the book works on a number of levels. I mean, it is one person's story, and it's one person's story that is, in a sense, a microcosm that relates to a much bigger picture that's going on. And at the same time, you know, it's also a spiritual journey. So if it works on all those levels, then that's wonderful. I hope it does.
Now, the actual book itself, Exile, it's available on Bookpatch, thebookpatch.com, but you have links to it on your site as well as I have them on our site as well. And people is that the only way to get through that book?
That's the only way to get it right now, is through the Bookpatch. I've had a couple people contact me, like they don't have credit cards or something. Can I order it for them? And I've actually done that for a couple people. I mean, they Western Union me the money and I order it for them. So if you don't have a credit card, you know, you're kind of out of luck unless, unless you can get somebody else to buy it for you. So it is to be ordered off the.
What about a ebook version? You know,
I'm thinking about it, but not yet. I haven't done it yet.
Is there a reason why you have not chosen Amazon? Just curious.
Amazon has caused some problems. They caused some problems with my first book, which was a poetry book. It's
okay. All right, that's fine.
Actually, I'm happy. You know, the Bookpatch it's certainly not Amazon in terms of it's not as big as Amazon, but it seems to be doing the job pretty well. So
it's a pretty reasonable price, $15.99. You know, a lot of books are like $29.99. Is there a well, excuse me, would you have any plans of having a electric like a PDF version of it at some point, or?
Well, I'm working on getting an ebook together. I just, you know, I'm running in so many different directions at once. Yeah. I've got articles, you know, sort of in the queue, and I've got this and that, and sometimes it seems like there isn't enough hours in the day. So I'll get the ebook put together. But right now, it's a hard copy book that is available off thebookpatch.com.
Yes, I'm trying to. My computer was jumping around, which I thought was funny. I was going to click on it so I can show the web page, but I'm looking for the link of it. I don't. Oh, I see. Here it is. All right. Okay. Well, before all this is before the book. I saw what you were doing. And I just knew from inside it needed to get out there. So I'm just putting up the Bookpatch page now. I am quite happy to have been working with you on this, and we'll continue to look forward for your review, your articles that you are writing, as well as the reports you do on Feet to the Fire. For those who may not be aware, there is a ongoing playlist under my YouTube channel which features her reporting, which you can just kind of click on and it goes right through them all. And so I will put this in there as well, in that little section, when I get this up and running, so people could do that. And once again, I appreciate what you're doing, and you're really both an inspiration and also a kind of a, I guess the word they use in Christianity is a conviction, is because, I may be complaining about this, that, and the other thing, but I'm not being sprayed with chemicals every night and leaving the country, and so it's like I kind of feel like I feel kind of bad about complaining now. But I mean, those are just reality slaps we need. Now, someone who wants to know truth, they're going to accept the slap along with the on the back and or on the face. And I think that's what you bring with, unfortunately, in one way, but fortunately for those who do accept it. So keep up the work, and anything I can do to help you, just let me know.
James, I think you're absolutely wonderful, and I just have so appreciated this association with you, and I just want to thank you for everything.
Well, you're welcome. I thank you again.
Okay.
There we go. That is Janet Phelan, and again, the bookpatch.com. You can search for the book there, or you can go to her website or feettothefireradio.com and click on the links as well. Don't forget her reports available on YouTube through Feet to the Fire. There's also a link in there that has a lot of audio stuff that she did before we did the video on Feet to the Fire. There's a little window that features her, and you can just click on those links and go to that. So, all right. We will see you next time. Reach for the skies within.
Oh, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who walked again, the ancient one of old, with wisdom for the new. Revive our inner sight, retell your timeless truth.